Well, good day, everybody. Welcome to a chance to visit with me on a Live with Kevin, a very special sort of Live with Kevin, usually up in this corner above up there. What you see from me is a logo for our podcast, the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. But today's something different. Up here today, up here today, you see the logo for our virtual LeaderCon event. So I'm doing this today in connection with and in relationship to our virtual LeaderCon event, which happens later this week, Wednesday and Thursday, September 20th and 21st. So I'm guessing that most everyone who's watching this is either watching it live with me or soon. So if you're watching this before the 20th or 21st, you just need to go to virtualleadercon.com and get registered. I'll tell you more about what it is in a second, but I want to thank you all for joining me. I see some people are joining in various platforms. If you're here, say hello, go into the comments and say hello in whichever platform you're in and do that. I'd love it if you would. So Virtual LeaderCon is a 2-day event this year. It's been as long as 5 days when we first started doing it early in the pandemic. This is the 4th year we've done it in September. And this year it's 2 days throughout the course of the 2 days in a different platform other than a social media platform, which allows for far more interaction between the guests and the participants like yourself. You have the chance to listen to me having conversations with, in this case, 12 thought leaders as we talk about a variety of topics, including leadership culture, including collaboration, in terms of leadership communication, in terms of the future of work, in terms of leadership in general, in terms of learning, all sorts of stuff that matters to you as a leader, that matters to our organizations, that matters to us as individuals. And you can join us for any or all of those 2 days worth of events starting at 10 a.m. Eastern time both days. Again, September 20th and 21st. You can join us live for free, 100% for free on a platform that will create tremendous amounts of engagement and is a great deal of fun as well as incredibly valuable. So I hope that you will choose to join us for a little bit of that session. And in anticipation of that, in a couple of days, I put together this session to help you think about all of the various types of largely video learning events that you might attend. You might attend webinars. You might attend lives like this is. You might attend or watch TED Talks or stuff on YouTube or listen to or watch podcasts. Now, I want to think about this first in terms of things that are live, like this, like a webinar, like some sort of live stream, like virtual LeaderCon will be. But many of the tips I'm going to share with you to talk about supercharging your learning from these kinds of events would also apply in things like podcasts or other kinds of e-learning in terms of YouTube, perhaps in terms of even TED Talks. So we'll talk about this from a live perspective, but also from an asynchronous perspective, as I want to give you some ways to get more from these kinds of events. Because when you look at the landscape of what's available to you for free, let's just take, I'm doing this right now on Facebook, and I guess we call it X now, and YouTube and LinkedIn. And in 3 or 4 years ago, you couldn't do something live on really any of those or very few of those platforms. Now it's matter of fact, pretty straightforward, very easy to do. Wasn't hard for me to put this together to deliver it for you. And so because of that, there's far more of this kind of live content. And if the content was live, it's now available afterwards. And of course, if you can go to YouTube, you can find hundreds and thousands of hours of content to listen to. And again, some of that live as well. So because we deliver a lot of that kind of content, and because people often ask me about this, how do we get more out of this? How do we get greater value from it? That's what I thought I'd do today. And again, I see lots more people are joining us now. So by all means, please say hello in the comments, whatever platform you're on, and let us know that you're here. So I'll put this back up here because I want to make sure that you join us for this later this week. Just right now, open another browser window, and type in virtualleadercon.com and then let that sit and come right back and be with me. And you can look at that in a few minutes. Okay. So what I've got are 5 big ways with strategies inside of each that you can use to supercharge your learning from these kinds of events. And the first one is select carefully. Anytime there's that much content to choose from, that many options to pick from, you want to be careful about what you pick. Now, if you're hearing these words, I'm going to thank you for picking this, right? So, but you know what? There are all sorts of things available to you. And so I want you to select carefully. Hi, Todd. I want you to select carefully on 2 levels. One is in terms of the presenter or the thought leader. Make sure that you're listening to people that are adding value, that really know what they're talking about, and that speak to you in terms of style and approach. So picking speakers is a helpful piece of this, but also select wisely in terms of content, because there could be lots of content that you have interest in. But since you can't take advantage of all of it, you can't just say, well, that looks interesting, or that looks interesting, or that looks interesting. But rather what you need to do is say, this is what I'm working on right now. This is a challenge that I'm facing right now. This is an area I'm trying to learn about right now, so that you can target in a little bit more. Now, I know that during Virtual LeaderCon, you might say, well, I'm interested in all of this, Kevin, but I might not be able to attend it all, to which I would say select wisely and pick the sessions during the 2 days that would add the most value for you right now. So step 1 to supercharge your learning from any of these kinds of tools is to select wisely. And the second strategy, if you will, is to watch with purpose. Watch with purpose. In other words, don't just show up, but show up with a reason. So this is the natural add-on to selecting carefully. So we select carefully, we watch with purpose, because now we're thinking about why we picked this session. We're thinking about what we want to get out of this. We are hopefully thinking about, maybe even writing down the question that you want to have answered by this session. What's the 1 or 2 things I really want to get from this? How does this connect with my learning goals, or why is this my learning goal? And all of this will train your brain a bit and will help give you a lens to look at this session through that will help you be more successful. So first, in case you're joining us late or you're trying to catch up, first is to select wisely. Second is to watch with purpose, so that you're purposeful in your consumption of the content. So we've picked great content with a great speaker. We've now chosen why we want to watch, and we come into the consuming of it mindfully, intentionally, which then leads us to one that applies less if we're watching this later. Like if you're with me here live right now, this applies 100%. If you're watching this later, it's a little harder to do some of what I'm about to say next, because the next thing is to participate actively. If it's a webinar, ask a question. If you came to this with a question you want to have answered, then ask that question. And I'm going to stop right now and say, if you have questions about anything that I'm talking about while we're doing this, ask them. Hello, Paula. I'm glad that you're here. So pleased to have you. So you can ask me a question as we go about this, or anything else for that matter. But if you're on a webinar and you came to it with purpose and you had a question you wanted answered, ask that question. Put it in the chat. Do whatever it is that allows you to do that. Ask your question, and just ask questions in general. Participate in it as if you were as an active learner, because that's how you'll get more from it. Another thing about participating is to answer questions. And by answering questions is if there's other things going on in the chat that people are asking about and you can contribute, then do that. But it also means if the speaker, if the trainer, if the facilitator is asking questions of the group, be one of the people to respond. The more that you are engaged in the learning, the more you'll get from the learning. Not any big surprise there, and yet we don't always do it. The next thing I would say is if you went to a workshop, whether you paid for it or your company paid for it, you're probably going to take some notes. Maybe not a lot. You're going to take some notes. You're going to have a journal. You're going to have something. You're going to take some notes. And so if you're watching a webinar with purpose, why wouldn't you take notes? Now, I'm not saying that you have to take notes like there'll be a test, because there is no test after the webinar. If you're watching e-learning, I suppose there could be a test. But take action-based notes. Take application-based notes. Take the notes about the things that you want to think about, the things that you want to consider, or the actions that you're going to take. And if you'll take those kinds of purposeful notes, you'll get far more from these kinds of events. If you can attend these kinds of things with a partner. Like, let's say that your organization sends out a notice about a webinar that's optional, so you can take if you want, or someone that you know points you to a webinar, or you find something or see something on social media and says, hey, I want to attend that. You can get even more from it if you have a colleague also attend with you, so to speak. Why? Because then you can talk about it afterwards. So by having a partner, a peer learning partner with you, you have the chance to then to debrief that together, to talk about it together, to unpack it together, and you'll get more from it. Two more things. If you're doing all the things I just said, if you're participating, if you're asking, if you're answering, if you're taking notes, then you don't have time to multitask. You don't have time for this. You don't have time. I mean, unless I suppose if you're watching it on this, but you don't have time for this. You don't have time for the email. You don't have time for the stuff. You should be focused on this one thing. If you really want to supercharge your learning from these kinds of events, you have to be focused on them. Now, I know that many of you might be saying, well, Kevin, if we're talking about something like a podcast, I might very well be listening to a podcast while I'm driving. I've done it. Listening to it while I'm exercising. I've done it, et cetera, et cetera. And I have zero problem with that. But if you've picked this specific thing purposefully, if this is about a topic that you really need to learn something about, if it's about a challenge that you really need to overcome, then I would say if you want to maximize what you get from it, you should stop doing other stuff. Again, so I'm not saying if you have a podcast you listen to, I could propose mine, the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, right? Like maybe you're listening to a podcast regularly and maybe you really just enjoy listening to it. I'm not saying not to do that. But what I'm saying is if you're going to participate in your learning, the more that you're multitasking, the less likely you're going to really get from this session what you want. In fact, I have often been listening to a podcast like, I'm enjoying this. You know what? I need to dive into this one more. I'm going to watch or listen to it again with my notes and not by doing something else at the same time. Okay. Again, this is about getting the very most we possibly can. And the last thing I would say, and this clearly applies to what we're going to be doing during Virtual LeaderCon, and that is learn from the group. If you're in a very interactive webinar, if you're at Virtual LeaderCon, if you're in another live sort of a live stream event of some sort where there's a healthy chat going on, there are things you can learn from it too, and not just from the speaker. Now, I know that we're balancing that with multitasking. Am I really listening there if I'm contributing here? But if I'm listening and learning from others in the room, that's a source of my learning as well. Hi, Gil. See, so people are saying hello. And if you say hello, I'll put you up here and people will know that you're here. You're famous, so to speak. So far we've said, if we want to supercharge our learning from webinars, live streams and the like, we need to select wisely. We need to watch with purpose. We need to participate. And then as the session is ending, we need to commit. We need to commit by determining what actions we're going to take as a result. If you ever listened to or watched my podcast, I always end with a commitment question, which is now what? What action am I going to take because I heard this information? What am I going to do with what I just learned? How am I going to translate this from knowing to doing? So if you really want to supercharge what you get from webinars and the like, virtual training and that sort of thing, is you need to commit by determining your action and by writing it down. Writing it down. Here's what I got. Here's what I'm going to do. You go to any sort of face-to-face training, and you're likely going to be encouraged to write an action plan when you're done. I'm suggesting you do that from a 60-minute webinar, from probably about a 25-minute live, from whatever it is that you're consuming. Be thinking about it through the lens of your purpose. Be thinking about it in terms of how am I going to apply this, and then commit to that. And then there's just one thing left. And by the way, if you do that, if you write it down, if you have an action plan, if you have a goal, and you know someone else that attended, then you want to share that with them, because now you've got an accountability partner for what you just learned. And you know what? That conversation with your peer that came to this session too might be a 5-minute conversation. It might be longer than that, but it might not have to be really long to capture what I got. Here's what I got. Here's what you got. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what you're going to do. And that sort of thing. It leads us to one more. So we've talked about selecting wisely. We've talked about watching with purpose. We've talked about participating. We've talked about committing. And the last one is to follow up. And to follow up means to follow up on the action plan that you just set for yourself. The one action you're going to take, the 2 actions you're going to take. Follow up with yourself. Follow up if you have other questions. So like if you were watching a live stream, you likely have an email address or some sort of way to get in touch with the speaker. So if you have a question afterwards, or if something wasn't as clear after you were in the session and went to try and apply it, ask the question. I can tell you, as a person who has done many of the kinds of things, webinars and lives, etc., that we're talking about here, that, and I think I speak for most speakers in this case, that if we get questions, we are thrilled, we are honored, and while we may not always have a ton of time, we'll almost always get you an answer. So if you have a question, ask it, right? Make sure you're following up on your action plan, and make sure you're following up with each other people that you know that were in this session, and that sort of thing. So I said I was going to spend a few minutes talking about how to supercharge your learning from webinars, live streams, and the like. And some of the things we talked about apply beyond just things that are live as well. And so let me walk back through the 5 pieces again really quickly. Those 5 pieces are to select wisely. Hello, Kamel from Algeria. So glad that you're here. So the first thing is to select wisely. Next is to watch with purpose. I've thought about who I want to learn from and what I need to learn. And then why am I attending? What is it that I really want to get? What are the questions I want to have answered? What is my goal? What is the lens I'm going to watch this through? And then be an active participant in the event. Engage with the instructor or instructors or thought leaders. Ask the questions that you have. Take notes, maybe not about what you're going to apply and what you need to make sure that you remember. Try to stay away from multitasking so that you can be participating in the learning so that you can maximize the most from it. Then commit to the actions that you want to take. Commit yourself to that. Write those things down. Follow up on those actions. Follow up with any questions you have of the instructor or facilitator. And if you attended with other people, follow up, with them as well. So those are the 5 steps to help you supercharge your learning from anything like this. And so Gil says, indeed, we can learn so much. Let's see. Indeed, we can learn so much from the speakers, but imagine how much more we can learn from the attendees as well. And Gil, you are so very correct. I often say that if I'm teaching a group of leaders, so let's say there's 15 leaders there, and if the average of their leadership experience is 3 years, they've got more than me. And it's almost always a higher average than that. So it doesn't take a very big group to have a group of people that have more experience with the topic than I might have. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't have something useful to share, but it does mean that if you limit what you're learning to just me, then you're not getting as much as you could. So Gil, you're exactly right, whether it's with Kevin or whether it's anyone else. So we can learn so much from others. And Gil, I'll tell the rest of you that Gil was not a plant, but there's no doubt that what Gil is saying is more true in some of these kinds of sessions than others. And that's largely because of the nature of the way that the facilitator engages the audience, and often the nature of the platform that's being used to do that. And I can tell you with certainty that if you join us for Virtual LeaderCon this week, that you will see one of the most engaged learning communities you've ever experienced online. I can say that because that's been true every time we've done it in the past. And so first of all, if you found value in this session, then what I've given you are things, giving you an immediate place to go try out some of those things during Virtual LeaderCon. And if you happen to follow me and have enjoyed learning from me over time, first of all, thank you. And second of all, know that at Virtual LeaderCon, you're getting me for 2 days. Now you're getting me with a bunch of other great guests, super smart, engaging people, but you certainly get the chance to learn with me during that time. And I can promise you that it will be one of the best investments of your time that you will make this year if you're serious about being a more effective leader. And the price is right, because it's $0 to watch it live. Now, you may already be saying, well, Kevin, I'm looking at my calendar on this 20th and 21st, and it's pretty much back to back, or I've only got a couple of windows. That's fine. You can join us when you can join us for free for live. And then if you want, you can get access to the recordings and transcripts and other bonuses later by buying. In fact, you can actually register now and buy the upgraded plan to get the recordings later. But you don't have to do that. Just pick a couple of hours over the days of Wednesday and Thursday this week and join us for Virtual LeaderCon. I promise you'll get great value, especially if you apply the things we talked about today. And I promise that you will enjoy the experience. And if you'll do those things, I guess I'll see you on Wednesday or Thursday this week. I hope I do that. And I hope that I see all of you soon, one place or another, including right back here on this social media channel where you're watching me now, when I'll be here twice next week with 2 more podcasts and on into the future as well. Thanks so much for joining me, everybody. I wish you the very best. Hope to see you on Wednesday or Thursday at Virtual LeaderCon. Thanks, everybody.